Good afternoon, everybody. It is Friday, the day after Thursday night football, and the day after Thursday for those of you here for our coverage of how the calendar works. I am Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, PurpleTerritoryRadio.com, and the host of the Morning Joe's podcast, which you can see every Tuesday or Wednesday morning around 9:30 a.m. On our website, on our social media, and on pretty much anywhere you look for your podcasts. Spotify, iHeartRadio, so on and so forth. I am here, as always, for we're doing our post game today because the game was late, and by the time I did the post game write up article, it was like 11 o'clock in Minnesota, and I think a lot of people were going to sleep. So this is our post game coverage, and that is why Mr. Kirby O'Connor, who is the managing editor of PurplePTSD.com, the host of About the Labor and Vikings on the Clock. He's here as well. How are you doing, man? We didn't really talk a ton after the game last night, so I didn't get a sense as to how you felt about things.
Yeah, no, I feel good. I mean, it always feels good after a victory, right? But we were texting back and forth a little bit during the game, and I think I had some time to decompress after the game because I thought this was a game that we really should have made a statement and stepped on their throat and just never let up. But
Yeah.
I read some good calming tweets from people who were. I'll talk about why that made me feel better in general. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to, especially so if for those not familiar, we do a pregame show, and then typically I do like a quick halftime thoughts show, and then we reconvene either after the game or the next day. And I feel like, well, there's a couple things. If not for that touchdown right before halftime, I think my halftime show would have been a little bit darker. But I do also think that even now, not being 12 hours removed, 16 hours removed from the game, that people are kind of ignoring the fact or the gravity that came with Keenum leaving the game. Things were, you could really get a sense of how much Keenum wanted to beat the Vikings, and AP as well. It was playing like a man maybe 10 years younger than he was. But Keenum was what when he left the game? I think he was 13 to 16 when he left.
12 of 16, yeah.
12 of 16. Not a ton of yards. I think he had 130. Yeah. Yep. But he was being playing efficient, playing well. He was taking advantage of what Zimmer called a soft Vikings defense. But if not for that touchdown right before halftime, it would have been a 6-6 game going into the half, and was a little disconcerting considering in the last 4 games the Skins had averaged 6 points per game. That some of that was skewed by the shutout that the 49ers put on them, but it was a lot closer than a lot of us would have been comfortable with. Like you said, and you talked about this in the pregame show. And I agreed with you. Maybe not that it matters in the grand scheme of things, but it would have been a really good statement game. It would have been a really good bounce back game for the Vikings defense. And I am saying that they gave up 9 points, so maybe I'm being nitpicky or perfectionist, but Keenum did end up leaving the game. Haskins was 3 for 5. He had an interception. He looked very much like the rookie project that he is. And so it just didn't feel as good as we wanted it to. And I don't want to get too caught up into meaningless things like, well, it was a national game and maybe that would have given them more shine on a national level. But after coming off of a Lions game where the defense was flat, it just would have been nice to have that feeling as well going into Arrowhead in about 9 days.
Yeah, it would have been like, as fans, maybe it's different for the players, but like as fans, like that game was like the most uninspiring way that they could have won. And I read some things about how it was a good strategy in the grand scheme of things because they didn't like show their hand much, and they didn't give anything away in a game that they really could have won. That they obviously won without really doing much. I say
And do you
not
mean
doing
in
much.
regard to like showing more plays like that other teams might be able
Yeah,
to
both
scheme against in the future?
both offensively and defensively, because Zimmer's defense was very vanilla, and it was very much just, well, don't get beat, which like we've talked a lot about that. Like, I hate that, but obviously it works sometimes, especially against bad teams that can't score in the red zone. um,
Yeah.
but like especially on offense, it was also very uninspired game plan. Like, they took one shot to Diggs on that, down the sideline, and that was about the only pass that Cousins threw that was over like 15 yards. So
Yeah, I saw a stat that I hadn't seen before, like an aggressiveness stat, and it said that Cousins was a 3.8 on that scale, which is the lowest mark since the Bears game, which was a 2.8. Um, and they kind of defined aggressiveness as throwing balls into tight coverage. So that's more of a maybe not a scheme thing, but a Cousins decision making thing. But yeah, you definitely got the sense that, and I think I said this either to you in a text or during the live chat, that they're playing not to lose more so than to really win. You got the sense on
mhm.
defense too that like they they like were coasting a little bit between the tens, and then they would bail themselves out with some miraculous plays like the batted pass by Eric Kendricks, or the play that Danielle Hunter had. They were bailing themselves out, and they're a good enough team to do that, but you would have liked more three and outs and things like that,
Yeah,
than what we actually ended up with.
yeah, certainly. Like, it obviously like doesn't matter now,
Yeah.
but like it, we saw that style of game get them in trouble in Chicago, because like they had a ton of chances to win the Chicago game. They just never took any chances like to try to win, really. And I mean, obviously, a lot of that is like Chicago's a way better team, and you don't want to make mistakes against their defense, maybe. But like, it was the same exact game plan. I feel like they just pasted. Zimmer just copy and pasted the game plan over for this week, from that Chicago game. Which, like, it sucks to watch, and like it would have been really embarrassing to lose. But again, like, we're nitpicking, like, because obviously they won, and like it was
Yeah,
good enough.
a 9 point game. Yeah, and we have what 9 days, including today, before the Chiefs game. Mahomes was ruled out there. I do think this game was a good example, though, and some of these things are not as important in the grand scheme of things on the field as they are to us, I guess. But I felt like this was a really good example of showing that Dalvin Cook really is the heart of this Vikings offense. I think that touchdown that he had, which was the only touchdown on the day for either team, really showed just what a gutsy, just amazing player that he is. There was the touchdown that he had last week where um was a goal line carry, and it looked like his hole just got blown up, and he kind of cut back, juked to the left, then juked right to the right almost instantaneously, and went in for the score. The touchdown that he had yesterday, also before halftime, which was incredibly important, uh, felt similar to that, like him turning something from nothing and really, willing himself into the end zone, when most backs would have been down at the one or the 1.5 or the two.
Mm-hmm.
Just all he just I don't want to say carried the team, because Cousins was incredibly efficient, and I felt like, well, I'll get into that in a second, but you just really felt like with Cook, he all the I think he had close to 200 yards again on the day, maybe 98 yards rushing, 73 receiving. Just another huge game for him that clearly, at times seemed to really inject the Vikings offense with some momentum.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Cook like necessarily like, especially like early on like won the game, but he definitely finished the game. Like he didn't start the game like incredible. I think he had like 40 some yards in the first half
Yeah.
and like a lot receiving, but it was mostly on like 130-yard screen pass. But I think between him and Madison, they really they really finished the game for
Yeah.
them, which is like
Madison especially, because Cook was on the bench at that point.
yeah,
But
which like maybe that's even better. Um, Maybe that's even better than like just destroying the Redskins because like maybe other teams will continue to realize that like they have to stop this running attack, which will open things up. Um, you know, in the future for the passing game. So maybe that's like what kind of the thing was they were just like, hey, we can win throwing, and then this week they were like, well, we can also win just by running it down your throat and by controlling the game, which is like exciting when you try to think about it in a positive way because like it shows that you can win by blowing teams out or by scoring 40 points, and then you can also win by scoring 19 points and controlling the whole game. So
yeah, I felt like this team this week and others has shown some resiliency. I mean, it's hard. You look at Cousins' line and his like 87% completion rate, and you think, well, how the hell didn't he throw for any touchdowns, or why weren't there more points on the board? There were a lot of holding calls, calls in general. The Redskins had a few. Uh, I think three like helmet to helmet or similar calls
mm-hmm.
during the game. But the Vikings the last number I heard was six holding calls, a lot of which went to Pat Elflein, who had a really bad game. His the worst game of his season slash
Mm-hmm.
career at left guard, which I'm sure people will be talking about all, in the next 10 days because there's been a growing contingent of people that have been really anti-Elfline and maybe bringing up Samia and so on and so forth. But
If anything, they should put Dozier in. I don't think Samia's ready personally, but
yeah,
also
wasn't he more of a right guard in
yeah, I think
college?
Samia played on the right side, but don't. I'm not sure. I think he did preseason at right guard. So
Okay, maybe that's where I'm
um,
getting it from. But the Vikings were shooting themselves in the foot a lot when they got into the red zone. They would end up on. There was more than once that they had like a first or second and goal from the 10 or then the 20. And so we saw some flashes of that in the preseason, more so from guys on the edge like Kyle Rudolph getting like what's the penalty I'm looking for when they block below the knee, um, clipping.
there you go.
So that there was just a lot of that, and they were good calls. I don't think the refs were overdoing it, although I do think that towards the end of the game the fans started booing the flags just for obvious reasons. It just was a
Um,
real slow game.
I mean, I think a couple of them were good calls. I think Elfline got unlucky where like because you can call holding on pretty much. There's that old saying you can call holding
Yeah,
on any play in the
every play.
NFL. I
Yeah,
think he did get unlucky on a couple of those holding calls as being the one who was called for it, but they didn't really look like anything that was outside of a normal NFL play. That being said, he still had a terrible game. Even if you
yeah,
remove those holding calls, he was not good in pass protection. And when he wasn't getting called for the holding calls, I feel like he didn't open up much unless Bradbury was helping him. So
yeah. It was a little disconcerting. I've been trying to withhold any judgment of Elfline because he hadn't played guard since college, but he was an elite guard at Ohio State, and I was extremely excited about the prospect of moving him to guard, and then having a guy like Bradbury come in. I called for it a few times last season with all the struggles that they were having and the fact that they had Brett Jones on the roster, so you would have thought they could have maybe at least improve things a little bit that way. But yeah, he's been struggling. But that having been said, that's what makes what Dalvin Cook and company did all the more exciting or elite because he wasn't getting a ton of help from the offensive line in that regard. Zimmer going into halftime during his interview said the Vikings were playing soft, and I could see it. I said it in the live chat maybe or on Twitter that they felt like they were playing prevent defense like the entire first half, where they were just giving up all these wide open first downs like in the middle of the field as if they were letting them pick up those yards to run out the clock or something. And yeah, after last week too, it's just not the most encouraging thing to see. Granted, again, they only gave up 9 points, but there was some heroics there, uh, from like Kendricks and Hunter, like I said. But what do you attribute that to? I saw a nice pass breakup by Trey Waynes. I think he did well. I think Xavier Rhodes didn't play well. Again, they talked about the Aikman. They always interview the coaches during the week in prep for the game, and they had said that Zimmer essentially kind of threw the idea that Rhodes is playing injured out the window. He said he's healthy and he needs to play better. Healthy might be a relative thing. He's not as hurt as he was last season, but he seems at least like he's been this at points this season, not necessarily last night, kind of gimpy. But yeah, we're getting more of the same from Zimmer saying, Rhodes needs to play better, which has been a refrain of his off and on over the last year and a half. So if he doesn't turn things around, I could very well see him not being on the team next year.
Yeah, it's really tough. It like as we've all like keep saying because I don't know what it like, especially last night. It seemed like a coaching thing as much as anything, where they told him not to get beat by that number 17 for the Redskins, who's like very fast.
Yeah, I wrote I forget his like Mick MC something McCauley or the young
McLaurin,
guy, right? Yeah,
McLaren.
yeah, like the car.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, but either way, like
yeah, Terry McLaren. You're right.
he got beat multiple times by Marvin Jones last week, and there was a couple times where like on those touchdowns he also was in the right position, just like Marvin Jones and Matthew Stafford. Like Matthew Stafford put the ball in the exact right spot, and Marvin
Yeah,
Jones like just made a very good catch.
and that's kind of his jam, right? Is contested catches, at least
Yeah,
from.
so like I wasn't worried. Yeah, I wasn't worried after last week's, because he put himself in the right position. He just needed to make maybe a slight adjustment, get his head around a little quicker, whatever. Um, get some luck and get it to bounce his way, but just to get worked essentially by a rookie, because you're trying not to get beat, and they know like that Zimmer said something about that being like they told him not to get beat. I think I can't remember where I saw that though, so I cannot like corroborate if that's correct. Um, but like even so, I just it doesn't make sense to me. Like the one that really doesn't make sense to me was the one that Keenum floated towards the end zone on their like second drive. The one where he got pass interference on it. He floated it up. It's an easy play where if Rhodes gets his head turned around, it's an easy, at least knockdown, if not pick, because the ball is not in a perfect spot. It's a jump ball situation. Rhodes has inside position. All he has to do is get his head around, find the ball, and like either pick it off or knock it down. That's a play
Yeah,
that Xavier Rhodes has been making his whole career. Um, and like he just didn't last night. Like he didn't even try to turn his head. He just ran into the guy. So I don't know
and Zimmer has
why.
criticized him about on that before. I think it was in the Giants game where he said he got his head around too late. Um, and so yeah, and you tie that into his frustration or his reaction to being um in the Lions game. When he threw his helmet and his mouth guard and all that, he's clearly frustrated, and I don't know what. Maybe that's a different angle I never thought about. I mean, maybe he was frustrated with some of the play calling last week, and because it clearly wasn't a ref thing, or at least he didn't go towards the ref. Maybe he's smart enough to not have done that, but it could have been that or a mixture of whatever. But yeah, it's it's a little disappointing
Mhm.
and disconcerting considering how long he's been in this system and how well he has played in it.
Yeah, and I think like he also, I again, I don't know if this is a coaching thing because we're not there, day in day out listening to them talk. But like, I think he also has been told to adjust his game a little bit, and like avoid those penalties as the league moved away from like at the start of his career he got a lot of penalties for being physical, and then like he kind of reined it in. But then the league did their thing where they were like, well, we're not seeing enough explosive plays and passing yards, so we're going to call defensive holding and defensive pass interference much tighter. So now he's had to try to become
Yeah,
like more of a technician.
The Jim Irsay rule changes.
Yeah. So like he's had to try to become more of a technician, which he just isn't. Like he's not that guy. He's a big physical corner, and I feel like right now in the NFL he does like have to change his game, and it's maybe a little too late for him to change his game, and maybe that's like they've been trying to adjust for penalties, and it's a little too late for him to because it's really hard to not do the natural thing that you've been doing for
Yes.
10+ years, and then turn around and they say, well, now you have to try to keep your hands off him and not bump and make sure that you're turning your head fully and not running into the receiver. And it's like, what do you want from, not that he shouldn't be able to do that, he's supposed to be an elite corner who should be able to adjust eventually, and if nothing else, he has the height to turn around and knock the ball down most of the time, but he just doesn't have it. He doesn't have it through his head or whatever that he needs to change his play. And maybe he does, and maybe he just isn't getting there yet. But still, like you said, he's 29 and on a huge contract, and Wayans is needs to be re-signed at this point because like he's our best corner, and there's a good chance that Xavier Rhodes isn't here next year, especially if like he doesn't have a good second half of the year. Even if he has a mediocre second half of the year, I don't think he's here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The easier thing to think would be, well, Wayne's could be gone because his contract is up, and Mackenzie Alexander, even though they aren't interchangeable guys, as much as some of the fans that respond to stuff like this might think they are. But again, Zimmer has, I don't think Zimmer is as loose with his tongue as some people do. I think that, especially in doing my show with Joe Oberly, who has had a lot of, up until this season, had a lot of access with a press pass. He's in the locker rooms, he's at press conferences, he overhears things that we don't. And I think that Zimmer has a system of, attempting to correct something that he doesn't like from a player. He'll talk to him. He might, focus on it in practice, and then I think the last thing that he does, like the last um, trick up his sleeve, is going to the media with it, so the player gets the pressure of the media, writing about it, and so on. It's like his last ditch effort, and if that is true, the fact that he's gone to the media and basically said that Rhodes isn't playing up to his contract is a big deal. It's a big deal regardless, but it's an even bigger deal in that context. And for a team that doesn't have a whole lot of cap space, having a top five, top seven corner in regards to how much he's being paid, not perform up to that level, isn't something that I think that a guy that's especially as hyper focused on the corner position as Zimmer is, and a perfectionist there, is going to tolerate for forever. I do think that he has in recent seasons kind of called out Rhodes when Rhodes is performing really, really well, like 2 years ago. But now it's a different ball game. I think that was more of a sign of Zimmer being a perfectionist and wanting Rhodes to basically be the best corner in the entire league. But now he's just not playing well, and I think a lot of that boiled over last week. But we'll see. I have faith that he can bring it back. Like you said, he's only 29 years old, man. Like, he did a lot this offseason to focus on staying healthy, and Zimmer says he's healthy, so we'll see. Another team leader who has been, well, this isn't the best segue, but it's been a little frustrating to see, is this is the third game now in a row where Diggs had a brain fart that led to either a turnover or almost a turnover. He had the amazing yard after the catch run, actually two of them, last night, and he didn't wrap the ball up. He got stripped. Diggs is known for his ability to pick up yards after the catch. I have that's why I've been wandering around. Um, a stat that I wrote down that I'll read really quickly. Diggs was able to make multiple big plays and totaling 7 receptions for 143 yards, an average of 20.4 yards per catch, according to Next Gen Stats. Diggs averaged 10.4 yards after the catch per reception. He also accounted for 77.06% of Minnesota's targeted air yards through 8 games this season. He leads the NFL with a season-long percentage of 45.48 of the team's targeted air yards. He also carded the 3 fastest plays by a ball carrier on Thursday, reaching 19.53 miles per hour on a 34-yard reception. Wow, he's fast. That really wasn't what I was talking about, but that's good enough. He is kind of it tied into the yards after the catch thing. He's had now 2 weeks in a row where he has fumbled doing that, and that's not something that was really his MO. I think before this season was ball security.
He hadn't
And
fumbled. He hadn't fumbled since his debut as a rookie, and
wow.
then until this season, and now he's fumbled what 4, 5, 6, 7 times.
Yeah, I don't know
Seems
what
like
what that's about, like I feel like maybe he's put a lot of pressure on himself now because he's squeaky wheeled. He's getting the grease, and he might be thinking he needs to play immaculately or bring himself to some next level because he made a big stink that the national media really latched onto. But I don't want to rehash this too much because we've talked about this a few times. But that's maybe why you don't do what he did with Cousins, because everyone's human and they make mistakes, and he's shown that now 3 weeks in a row, with the other one being the interception that bounced off his hands and face mask when Sendejo nabbed it.
yeah,
But he had a great game otherwise.
yeah, he did. I think it's just he's trying, like you said, he's trying too hard to pick up yards when there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Um, the interception from Sendejo, that's kind of like whatever. That happens occasionally. It was kind of just a freak play because like even though it went through his hands, like what are the odds that it hits your face mask and becomes an interception?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, the one that is like more concerning is the fact that he had a chance to like essentially put away the game in Detroit and let it slip through his hands, a la Troy Williamson, just like
Yeah.
split the hands right through. Um, and there was and in the Lions game he also, or not the Lions game, the Eagles game, he also had the potential of what would have been his third touchdown, where he just lost it in the lights, I think, and had no idea where it was. So those things are like concerning, and the fact that they're all happening like in a span of like 5 weeks is concerning.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's not time to like really be an issue because it hasn't lost any games for us. Um, I guess you could argue that what was it, the Green Bay game where he fumbled, or was it Chicago where he fumbled and it like on the first drive or something. There was one early in the season, either Green Bay or Chicago, where he fumbled and we lost the game. But like, it must have been Chicago that I'm thinking of. Either way,
Yeah.
that's the only one that's really come back to hurt the Vikings. Which is like maybe that's just the luck of the thing. But it's something to keep an eye on for sure, and definitely a talking point to explore in the future. But I think he just needs to tighten it up a little bit and realize. And I think he did it in the second big
Yeah.
run he had last night, where
Yep.
he realized he had nothing left and he just went down.
Yeah,
And that's something that
totally.
Thielen does too, very well, where he realizes he doesn't have anything left and he just falls to the ground.
Totally, and that's something that Randy Moss used to get a lot of crap for back in the day, because they said he had no um, that he had no heart, or that he was a wuss because he would always go down. I'd much rather have, especially guys like Moss or Diggs, who are really thin. Not That's not their game. That's not what you want from them. And with Diggs's injury history, especially, you don't want that because I mean the Vikings had 4 receivers in the game last night. They're still extremely thin at the position, but it was great to see that Diggs. Outside of that, he had 143 yards, I believe.
Mhm.
That's the stat that I read awkwardly was, he was 77% of the passing yards, targeted air yards went to him. I don't know what that I can presume what that means, but I don't know what it means exactly. But
Um, I think it's like I don't know why it's called 70. I don't know why it's called targeted air yards,
yeah, like
but
just targeted targets, receptions, like that could just be the amount of throws that went to him. I don't know if that's like if there's some caveat to it.
well,
Um,
the fact that it's yards doesn't make any sense because like if the targets shouldn't factor into yards at all. If it's like percentage of yards, like air yards gained, that makes sense, but it doesn't. I don't know why targeted needs to be in there
yeah,
unless there's some like
weird.
weird caveat that like if it's not intentionally, if it goes off someone and like it's not intentionally targeted towards that person and they get yards on
Average
it.
targeted air yards, average passing air yards per target for the receiver by measuring the yards downfield at the time of all passing attempts that the receiver is the target. The stat indicates how far down the field they are being targeted on average. Oh, so on average, how far down the field they are when the ball is thrown versus just like how many yards they pick up, I guess.
Oh, so
I
he was targeted longer than everybody else last night.
yeah, I feel like
It's pretty normal.
the NFL and the analytics guys are really going like the baseball route of finding these incredibly
It
mundane
doesn't.
stats.
Sorry, that doesn't matter. Like, why is
I
that a
know, I
like
know. That's
he
exactly what I mean.
give
Like,
us the percentage of the yards that he actually picked up. Like, you don't have to talk about oh he was targeted longer than anybody else because like
yeah,
yeah, guess what? That happens every week with Diggs. He's targeted longer than anybody else. So
yeah, it's dumb. Um, I really feel like the NFL is turning into baseball. With the length of the games and all of it, and now you have these incredible quote unquote stats. Um,
they
yeah,
indicate
just
something.
that yeah, some people have too much time on their hands. Uh, really quickly, I just want to shout out Dan Bailey. He had another big night. I think he was perfect last night. He had a
Nope.
couple chip shots, a
Yep. Yeah,
27
he
yarder,
did.
a
He was
29 yarder, but he had a 50 yarder and like a 49 yarder.
something like that. Where's
Um,
kicking out here?
it's we talked about this a little bit last week, so we don't need to get into it too much. But I have a lot of confidence in him. I used to always joke that Blair Walsh was responsible for my smoking habit because for some reason, I decided to start smoking at the age of like 30 years old, which maybe to fit in. Um, and I used to smoke every time the Vikings were kicking a field goal because I just didn't trust Blair Walsh. And I don't get the same nervousness when Bailey's back there. He's
Four
been looking
for 50
really,
yards.
really
Extra point.
good.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Well,
want to give
and
him credit because a lot of people were ripping on him this offseason, myself not so much included, but I was a little worried about what was going on, more so with the team, the decisions they were making. And so I think we should give him the credit that he deserves because he might have been right when he said it was all about the holder. And
yep,
we're
absolutely.
seeing
Like
that.
just as much credit, especially for last night, goes to Colquitt, especially on one of I think it was the second field goal. Um, it was a terrible snap. Like it was high and inside, so Colquitt had to catch it up here and get it down. And like he got it down in plenty of time for Bailey to kick it in rhythm. So like that's just something that like you don't see like obviously when the snap is perfect and the hold is perfect like it's not that big of a deal. It's like oh whatever holder, but like to make that kind of play was probably one of the most impressive plays last night. To like
Yeah.
get that hold down, which is like I don't know if that's sad or not, but like it was very impressive to catch that and get it down in time with
No,
the laces out.
I always, I mean, at least not to me. I don't, I always think that is one of the harder positions in the game, and that those guys don't get enough credit. I mean, the amount of pressure that you have on you as a holder is crazy, and you never really hear about the holder like after like a lot of the legendary kicks that have gone down in the NFL in the last 6-7 decades. You don't ever hear about the holder, but that's a man I could not. I'm not built for it, obviously. Um, do you like the purple on purple jerseys?
Um,
I guess it was the sixth time ever in team history that they wore that. I know they used to have the purple pants back in the day,
mhm,
but they didn't wear the purple on purple, at least not with the
not very
yellow
often.
numbers. I like the
Um,
white numbers better than
yeah,
the
no,
yellow
I
ones.
hate the yellow numbers. I
I've never been a fan of the yellow practice jerseys with the purple numbers either. They look too Green Bay to me.
they just yellow is such a terrible color to use as like a main color on
Yes.
anything. Um, that it's awful, and like I don't know what it is about the cut of these like particular new jerseys that and like leaving them like all purple down the sides and everything, and only having the yellow stripes. Like it doesn't look like there's any defining thing to the jersey and like the pants, so it doesn't work for me. There was one game that I remember in particular where they wore purple pants and purple jerseys back when Bernard Berrien went off for like 3 touchdowns. That's a pull. And he wore yellow shoes and he got fined for it. But like those were awesome, but those had like the piping down the side and everything,
Yeah.
and so it gave you some definition. These ones, it just doesn't. I hate it. I'm gonna be honest. I hate the NFL's whole color rush thing because it takes away the personality of a ton of jerseys. Um, People talk about how they love like the Saints like white on white, but like I hate those as well because like they don't have the definition down the side, which is like the biggest thing to me. Like it doesn't. It's just white.
Yeah, I really I guess I'm not a big fan of changing a lot of things that I find iconic. Like I still miss the old school Vikings jerseys from when I was a kid. I hated the jerseys that they came out with when the Wilfs first got here. I always feel like a team that's doing well never changes their jerseys either. It seems like a marketing gimmick to sell more jerseys because the product on the field sucks. Like the T-Wolves have changed their jerseys multiple times this century. And it doesn't seem to, they have that weird lime green, almost Seattle Seahawks e version of the T-Wolves jersey. Um,
To be fair, they haven't had a good set of jerseys since KG was there, so that
yeah,
might
the
be
old
part of it.
ones that were like the black ones that had the little
The
trees on
trees,
them.
yeah.
I like those were dope. But yeah, usually it's not a winning team that makes that change. I guess another shout out to AP. He did pass Jerome Bettis and LaDainian Tomlinson on the all-time rushing list. I wonder how much of what he's doing. Joe on Morning Joe's this week was saying he's happy for AP, that he's still plugging away and having big games, and that he's happy. And I don't necessarily think AP is playing because he wants to. I think he needs to financially. But I mean, I don't know that for sure. I just know that I mean, I know that he's had money problems. Um, but I also think that he does want to, leave a mark on the league, and he really did want to beat Emmitt Smith's rushing record, and being suspended for multiple seasons or hurt. I mean, hurt and suspended doesn't help that. But I think AP looked, not vintage AP because he was next level back then, but he still looked
He
good. I
looked,
mean,
yeah, he looked
that
very good
there
for
was that
his age.
totally. Or just in general. I mean, he looks like a good running back. I mean, he had that play where he kind of did the cutback and then picked up like 17 yards. That looked a little bit like vintage AP, although vintage AP would have housed that one. And he actually caught 2 balls, which is something we aren't used to here in Minnesota. And so, I haven't been a big fan of what AP's done or said about the Vikings since he's left here. I think he's been really petty. Um, that having been said, he's probably never heard the word no in his entire life, so he's, I guess, is not as big as a jerk as he otherwise could be. I mean, his hometown has parades for him every year. he is a holiday for himself. So it could be worse, but yeah, it was cool to see. He was clearly pushing himself more than usual. I fully expected a fumble from him though,
Yeah, I
because
thought he
of
was
that.
going to, but
You know,
yeah, I mean, it was nice to see. It's nice to see like a player that's like on the field a legend in your team's history. It's nice to see them like do well, no matter where they go. I think you know uh, off the field things aside, like it's really as a player, it's interesting to watch him like continue to do well.
yeah,
Um,
and like
I I think he still has that hunger to be like a player and be on the field and win. Unfortunately, he's in Washington. Uh, but I also think he probably does have some financial troubles that like he doesn't. There's a reason he's not gonna give like as much as like he probably would run till the wheels fall off anyways.
yeah,
Um, there's a reason he didn't take a low ball offer, and it's because he also needs money.
yeah. I mean, that's what happens when you have that many kids and child support, and then when you objectively punish them too hard. With draconian methods. You lose all your sponsorships. I have a feeling he'll get into coaching or broadcasting after he's done. There's decent money in that, but it was cool to see the changing of the guard too, seeing Delving the what's new and what the Vikings could still have, I guess, if they really wanted to pony up money for that. But the last thing I'll leave us with our listeners and followers with is where you're at confidence level going into the Chiefs game. Do you expect Mahomes to play? I know you mentioned yesterday you think that maybe they're doing the will they won't they just to make the other teams prepare for both. But I can't imagine even a week out that he'd be back. If he was, he'd have a brace on. He'd be really susceptible to re-injuring himself. I can't imagine that they would do that because it would risk not only this
Yeah.
season but next season.
He's your franchise. He's the face of your franchise. He's super young. It just won an MVP for you. Like
He's
I
arguably the
don't.
face of the NFL or the future of the NFL anyway.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Between him and Saquon Barkley and Delvin Cook and Lamar Jackson, um,
Adrian Peterson, who's going to play till he's 50.
he's gonna play until literally he can't walk anymore.
Like the
Um,
opposite of Robert Smith.
yeah, I don't think there's any way that they, especially in like a weak AFC. Like I know their record isn't incredible. They're sitting at where is it here? They're sitting at 5-2, but like even like the AFC is so weak that like a 500 team has a chance at making a wild card spot.
That's a good point.
So I
That's a
don't
really good
I
point.
don't think that either this game against the Packers they have this week, which they've got. Oh my goodness, did you? I Schefter put out the inactives for the Chiefs. Let me see if I have it here. In addition to quarterback Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs will also be without D tackle Chris Jones, defensive end Frank Clark, cornerback Kendall Fuller, left tackle Eric Fisher, and offensive guard Andrew Wiley against the Packers on Sunday night. So basically, the
Wow.
Packers get the worst possible version of the Chiefs that they could.
Of course.
Imagine that. I mean, it's not bad. Sorry, we got a chat here. It's not bad if Mahomes plays. I think that's like a good like test. But I don't think the defense needs to see it because you won't face another guy a la Mahomes until the Super Bowl if they get there because the NFC doesn't
And what
have
talent wise?
well just
You're
play
not a big.
style wise.
I was gonna say maybe Dak Prescott, but yeah, I'm kidding. I'm not a big Dak guy
Yeah,
myself.
not I'm not huge on him either, but like the two guys that have that skill set are both AFC guys in Jackson and Mahomes, so I'm not too worried about it. I mean, Mahomes is also just incredibly probably the most talented young quarterback right
Yeah,
now. He probably like as far as like elite level, he's probably third to or fourth or fifth and like the other guys in front of him are like, unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson,
Yeah.
and Brady, just because he wins games, like not because he's necessarily that level of player anymore, but he still wins so many games.
Yeah, and would you say, I mean, where are you at? Maybe we should start doing this each week, like on a scale of 1 to 10, confidence in this Vikings team and their chances to make a run, maybe. I mean, we can really hammer down what this means before we do it next week, but maybe we'll find a scale of like, are we happy, sad, excited, so on and so forth. But like, where do you feel you are? I mean, I'll just explain kind of how I feel. We'll refine this before we come back next week. But, um, I think the Vikings showed that they were the better team last night. I think that they kind of toyed with them a little bit. Like going for it, we didn't even talk about that, but going for it on fourth and like 1 from your own 30, I think showed that they just knew they were the better team. And a lot of people are saying, well, Zimmer knew the defense would bail him out if it didn't work. That having been said, the defense hadn't really. I mean,
They hadn't played well up till that point,
they
like
were giving up a lot of
exceptionally well.
yards, but
Um,
yeah, they weren't like shutting them
and then
down.
they got bailed out on a tip ball, which like finally they got a tip to go their
Yeah.
way, which they had so many in the last couple weeks that just fell to the ground.
Yeah, so that helped. I mean, but I do think that I'm trying to think of like what the most complete game this team has had. It's been the offense plays poorly, but the defense has played well. Maybe the Raiders game was the best representation of this team firing on all cylinders.
I think you could reach all the way back to like, yeah, either Oakland or Atlanta, but Atlanta you also
Yeah,
didn't throw the ball well at all. Like you just ran it down their throats. So
totally.
I think Oakland is probably the best complete
Representation of
game.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to see more of that. They have to start getting on the same wavelength with each other, moving forward. And so I'm not super confident in it, but I mean, they didn't give up a touchdown. They showed that they were the better team. I think the NFL should be terrified of this team getting it together, though. I will put it that way. I've started to see a little bit more comments from talking heads in the national media saying, like, I even saw, this morning people saying the Vikings are the team to beat in the NFC, national writers, well-known ones. But they're not there
Do
yet.
they
They,
not
they,
know
they
the Packers exist?
ugh, ugh.
Sorry, it was a quick sidebar. My dad was texting me this morning that he was watching ESPN, which I have to have a conversation about that. But they were saying that Aaron Jones is still like at Dalvin Cook's level or better. So,
What?
even
Oh.
though he has significantly less rushing yards and like 100 less receiving yards. So, but it's the Packers,
Because
so
he
ESPN's
had
gonna
that
push that.
totally, because he had that 4 touchdown game or whatever, maybe, but he hasn't been. He's on my fantasy team. It's not like he's been amazing either. Week to week, he's had big games, but anyway, yeah, I'm still waiting for things to kind of coalesce and for them to really put it all together.
Which is funny because like at the same time we've been waiting for the bottom, like up until like the last couple weeks we've been waiting for the bottom to drop out, like we've been
Yeah,
waiting for the other shoe to fall.
totally.
But like yeah, now that we've won, and this is kind of what we talked about coming into this 4 game stretch where you had like very winnable games. Like we talked about the confidence that we would feel and like the team would feel rolling into Kansas City, winning 4 in a row. Having a nice long break into Kansas City is huge. You essentially get
Definitely.
like you essentially get like a
Why?
bye week.
You do. It's actually that's the best way to put it, and it's great to have that.
I would actually
After winning
argue,
4 games in a row, I mean, I don't want to be too nitpicky either, but you know what I mean.
yeah, I would actually argue that like even having that Thursday night game into like the 10 days off essentially, is even better than a bye week because you don't have to like not play. You
Yeah,
get a nice long break, but it's not too long, and hopefully there's no hangover going into Kansas City. That being said, with the way the defense almost inevitably shows up flat in big games to start the game, there probably will be. But as far as like overall confidence in the team making the playoffs, I'll start there. Highly confident. I think a 70% chance to make it now. Their chances to win the division get exponentially better if Green Bay actually has to play a fair game.
It's you're being snarky, but it's also really true. Um, Unfortunately, but I will stand by this. And my Taylor, my girlfriend, is coming off of a lifetime of being a Packers fan, and she'll still say things to kind of rile me up. But yeah, she basically yesterday said she thought the Packers were going to win the Super Bowl, and I said I don't think the Packers are that good of a team, to be honest. I think the Vikings are better.
I don't
They
think
just
I think the Packers are the tied for the third best team in the NFC North. So
yeah, and that's really not just being biased and saying because we hate the Packers so much. I don't think they're that good. I think the defense is still young. I don't think Rodgers is the same Rodgers that we were afraid of 5, 6, 7 years ago. So I'm not really worried about them. I'm happy the Bears are having their struggles because they scare me more if they were operating at the level they were last season. Or if they were able to figure that out, that would be a little more scary for me. But yeah, as of right now, things are.
their turnover rate was totally sustainable though.
I know. I knew you were gonna say that.
I love to bring it up every time.
But this has been the belated post-game show for Vikings Skins. We will be covering all Vikings news and Vikings Redskins stuff over the weekend. Look for this show sometimes next week. Look for about the labor, the show that Kirby hosts. When do you expect that to roll next?
We usually expect it on Wednesdays. It came out yesterday, on Thursday. But it really depends on schedules. But I really try to do Wednesdays because Wednesday is
Okay.
the perfect midpoint. And it also
Yeah,
depends on when Morning Joe's comes out, if it's belated or early or whatever. So because we try not to step on each other's toes.
yeah.
But more than likely it'll be Wednesday. Also, we need to talk. I'm saying this on air so I can hold you to it. We need to talk about getting that on iTunes, Spotify, whatever, because we now have more than 5 episodes.
Oh,
So
perfect. Well, I can do that. When we get off the air, look for Morning Joe's. We should be around on Tuesday at 9:30. We record live. Look for our other show, Load the Box. And Kirby and I should be back just chatting it up, doing this video show sometime next week as well. We'll keep you guys posted on that on social media. But the Vikings are 6-2. We got a ton of days off just to really revel in the 4-game winning streak. All is well in Vikings land, and we'll catch you guys next time. Skol.
Skull.